We're going to dive right in like we usually do to look at some price action, market action first. Let's take a look at this tweet from Turdemeester, one of my favorite market analysts in Bitcoin and just an awesome person in general, posting a chart here of Bitcoin in gold terms. And Bitcoin is in a 4-year holding pattern versus gold. And Tur says once it breaks out, the rally will be epic. John, would love to hear your take on this chart.
Yeah, I think a couple things here. One is that most analogous asset to Bitcoin is gold. It helps in explaining Bitcoin to normies. And in addition to that, their prices are often going to move somewhat similarly. Obviously, Bitcoin has way more volatility, way better annual performance over the past bunch of years. But I think it's interesting that we see them move in the same general direction over time. And this chart and some others have shown that typically, not always, but typically gold ends up leading Bitcoin in price appreciation. And that's been the historical pattern. I think one exception to that, by the way, was about this time last year when the ETFs got launched. So there can be idiosyncratic things that cause Bitcoin to outperform, but historically, much of the time, gold price has risen ahead of Bitcoin price rising. Gold is at an all-time high now. It has done very well. I think technically gold is forming Bitcoin year to date. So Peter Schiff gets to take his mini victory lap. But yeah, the takeaway there would be if that trend continues, it's signaling that Bitcoin might be coiling up for some appreciation here.
I think
when breakout versus gold.
Oh, sorry. Here we go. I'll raise my hand. I think it's important to keep the gold pair versus Bitcoin in mind because it's easy for us to get really excited against the dollar or the Canadian moose shekel or the Australian kangaroo peso. But those things are getting printed out of control. And so it gives us a little false sense of growth. So I think gold's a better real pair for us to look at. And it's the same thing when you look at common knowledge in the US, in quotations, which is that put your money in real estate and you're gaining purchasing power. You're just pouring money down the drain if you're renting. But if you look at real estate prices over money growth, you're really just buying, you're taking on fiat debt. So you get to buy an asset. You're essentially shorting the dollar, and that's where your gains come from. But the home price just more or less keeps up with inflation. Similar with the stock market. It's good to keep those in mind. And what I think here, zooming way out for a second, is I still think gold is going to make another attempt as the Eastern countries, let's say. We're starting to fracture a little more multipolar world, and the East has been selling US sovereign debt and buying gold for a very long time. And I still believe that we're going to see gold attempt another run at global reserve currency. I think it'll fail. I think Bitcoin will ultimately take that place, but I don't think the confidence is quite there yet around the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think gold always tends to run first and then Bitcoin tends to follow. And we've seen that plenty of times before. But you say it's like, gold has outperformed Bitcoin year to date, but you got to zoom out and look over the past 15 years and it's not even close, not even close. So Peter Schiff has got to take a loss on that. But yeah, I agreed also. I keep Bitcoin priced in gold as like my main driver of the price because it's pricing Bitcoin in infinitely inflatable fiat it's just a much more like grounded barometer of really where we are. So, and right now we're just like right around all-time high in gold. So we're still bouncing on the door and we're ready for a breakout.
It's like pricing TV and radio terms. It's the better technology. Let's measure it against the previous best in class technology. Yeah, absolutely agree. It looks like we might get an audit of Fort Knox, guys. Trump has talked about it. Elon talked about it this week as well. Trump said he's going to go himself. That's what he said. I don't know if that'll happen, but the guy's got a knack for putting together great meme-worthy photos. So him walking into the front doors of Fort Knox would be pretty incredible to see.
You had talked about live streaming it on, I'm assuming on X, like a walkthrough of the gold, but I did a video on that too, where it all comes down to who's going to trust the audit anyways. Wouldn't the US government be incentivized to say that all the gold is there? Like, it would be really bad for them to be like, oh, none of the gold's here. There's this like pipe dream that they're going to be like, oh, we don't have the gold, so we're just going to go ape into Bitcoin. But yeah, it's very unlikely. I would say if anything, this is just an advertisement for why Bitcoin, because it's instantly auditable by anyone. You don't need to trust some government agency to go in and do an expensive and time-consuming audit. And we don't need to trust governments to tell us that they have all the gold when we need to see it on a live stream or whatever.
Yeah, wherever you land on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that it's absolutely absurd that we don't have this thing audited like at least once a year. This is the public's gold. We have the right, in my opinion, to see if it's there or not.
I'm surprised they haven't just said, oh, we've audited it and it's there.
Yeah, I think that's what they do say, but who knows? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. All right, so we've got Bitcoin on the verge of a breakout against gold, which is quite bullish. We've also got, I think we showed this chart last week, but I think is also a very bullish chart. Speaking of current price action, this is the yellow line is the MVRV, which is basically the market value versus the realized value. The realized value is a measure of the price at which the coins were bought. So basically people's cost basis over time. And you can see the big spikes in the bull runs, and we're still hanging out down here, indicating that we're still very much in the early to mid stages of a bull run. So good charts right here for bullishness. I think the breakout is imminent, in my opinion. I think we'll see something in the next few months for sure, and probably run up pretty crazy. It'll get to the frothiness maybe toward the end of the year.
And is it just going to be a stair step? And we're just like, because everyone's expecting that like euphoric blow off top, which I mean, it could happen. But I know Steven had given his thoughts on it. I'm curious what you guys think a little bit more of it, because I've done videos on this too, where you can't deny the fact that everything has changed. It reminds me of Saylor's talk at, I think it was Prague last year, where he's like, this is the beginning of the Bitcoin gold rush with the ETFs, the institutionalization, even now nation state sovereign wealth funds buying it. And then even just not running up to 100K and I was so expected a crash back down to 80 or something, or high 70s, as would have been characteristic for other bull markets. And that didn't happen. It's just steady accumulation and kind of consolidation. It's going on, almost 4 months now. Reminds me of what happened when it was up at 70, 80 for 6 months last year. Maybe we're just stair stepping up. Who knows?
Yeah, I've been saying this for a while. I think that we're probably entering into a new era in terms of the chart action, much less of drawdowns in the midst of a bull market. And I think maybe this pattern of just like a 20% consolidation band for a long time, and then spikes up, and then another consolidation band, a stair step, could certainly be what we're looking at. The market is maturing. There's a lot more money in this, a lot bigger players now, a lot more sophisticated players. So I think that those big dips will be bought up much more quickly than they have in the past.
Two things here quick. For Fort Knox, I think I'd like to send in our auditor, Pierre Richard. That would make me feel comfortable if he audits it in the same way that he was trying to get to the bottom of the Ethereum ledger. So I think he's our champion.
Yep.
When we bring up MVRV, I think that the big takeaway there is that even against hodler orthodox, people do sell when they're in profit. That's been shown on the on-chain stuff. I think we'll talk about, is it price suppressed, or is this just run of the mill taking profits type thing? But it shows very consistently above 3x profits, people do sell coins. Then you get to 100K, it's a nice psychological number. Humans can't help themselves. If you're a long-term hodler, feels like a pretty big milestone. And it's not surprising to me that we hang out here for a while and we churn through all that new supply coming onto the market. And hopefully individual plebs are stacking that coin and it's not just getting hoovered up by the sailors of the world, because we do want as much distribution as possible here. That's good for the network long term, and we want individuals to benefit from the price run as well.
Unfortunately, I feel like I was a little bit bummed about this recently too, because I think about just anecdotally, my circle, everyone's like waiting for a dip. Like my sister was buying some and I'm waiting for it to go into the 80s. I'm like, I think it's like people, there's obviously sellers, like people are taking profit because they have ton of coins and it's money. Bitcoin is money. I think people seem to have a problem with long-term hodlers selling, but it's just, money is a means to an end. You're not going to hold it until you're dead, right? So not everyone can be like Saylor, but yeah, it's people are selling, and unfortunately, it seems like it's being hoovered up by the big institutions and sovereign wealth funds. And it seems like, at least now, retail is on the sidelines.
I'll just chime in real quick. Also, one comment on Fort Knox stuff. I have a really hard time seeing either, number one, that Trump and Elon don't know what is like behind the Fort Knox, or at least have a good idea. I don't think they want to go into that situation not knowing what they're going to find in an audit, because God forbid you do find that less gold, no gold, whatever, you're like handing yourself a crisis that you now have to deal with. So I just really, even if they like point the finger to someone else, you're in power now, like you have to deal with it. So I have a really hard time seeing them going into that and letting it come to the point of discovering that there's no gold or there's less gold. I'd be shocked if it comes to that. And then on the other stuff, agree with you guys. I think the fact that anytime the price has gotten down to, what has it been, 93 has been a general resistance level this year. It hasn't really dipped below that in a meaningful way. Or when I say this year, really since the election, when that first run up, the first time we crossed 100K, we've dipped down to 93K, and it just seems like there's a good amount of buyers. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot of support here.
It looks like there's about $400 billion worth of gold in Fort Knox, if we believe the total amount. Is that what you guys are seeing? And that also assumes repricing to current market pricing.
Yeah, I was confused about that. Maybe one of you guys can answer that.
Yeah.
Why do they not want to reprice it to today's value? They're like, no, they're valuing it. Don't they value it at like 45 an ounce or whatever it was when Fort Knox was built? Isn't that how it works? I don't really understand why they would do that.
Yeah, like on paper, this is my understanding of it. I haven't really did a deep dive on this because I just don't think it matters too much, to be honest with you. When I say don't think it matters, I'm referring to the fact that they have it marked on paper at a much lower historical price. If they just say, hey, we're going to market, okay, it makes the US government's books look like slightly better. It's not like the debt goes away or something. Like, you still have tens of trillions of dollars in debt. The one scenario that I do think is interesting for gold is something Luke Roman has pointed out, that if they somehow market up well above the market price and they try to basically pump the price of gold, there's like varying ways that they could do this. They don't have just unilateral control to say this is the price of gold now, but they could like influence gold to be much higher than the current market price. That would be interesting to me. If they just say, hey, on our books, we have it at 40 an ounce or whatever it is, now we're going to mark it up to 3,000, the market price. That's like an accounting thing that I don't think has too big of an impact.
That's correct. That just tells you how high the US debt is, though. If they repriced it to, what would that be, an increase of over 90% in value of their gold, and it would still not put a dent in the debt? It just tells you how bad the debt is.
Yeah, if we call it 500 billion in gold against 36 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
Not going to do much.
Not a drop in the bucket, yeah. For sure.
We'll talk a little bit about the bit bonds idea later in the show, but that is an idea that would hopefully put much bigger dent in the deficit and the debt than selling off all the gold would, the value of our gold.